Good afternoon, learners from the Northern Cape, and I believe there's also learners from the Overberg and the Western Cape joining us this afternoon. We're indeed very glad that you've joined us. If there are any educators or principals, thank you for attending this session with your learners. It's always important for them to know that you are also concerned about their progress. We are indeed very glad you've joined us for this session. You will recall that we had 5 previous sessions and we looked at the following. If you could just go to the slideshow. The first 5 sessions we dealt with. Session 1, we identified challenges. Session 2, we looked at long-term strategies. Session 3, we looked at strategic management tools. In session 4, we covered the impact of recent legislation. And in particular, we looked at the Employment Equity Act and the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. In session 5, we had the impact of recent legislation and we looked at the Labour Relations Act and the Skills Development Act. So today, what are we going to cover? Today we're going to look at Bbbee and also the National Credit Act. But before we start, I would like to introduce my co-pilot this afternoon, Amanda. Welcome to this, the 3rd, 5th, 6th session of Business Studies Revision. Could you kindly just reintroduce yourself to the learners of the Northern Cape and the Western Cape?
Good afternoon, grade 12s. I'm Amanda Juries. I'm a business studies teacher. I just want to tell you, grade 12s, we're a week away from prelims, so we should be focused and we should be working hard. Glad to see that you're joining us this afternoon. Send us an SMS so that we can know who's listening to the live broadcast. Thank you, Leicester.
Thank you, Amanda. Maybe we just need to remind them of the SMS number, 31498. 31498. Please send us an SMS and tell us from which school you are and maybe introduce yourself also so that we can acknowledge your presence here today. Righto, today we're going to look at the Bbbee Act and also the National Credit Act. Now, I know you may not have a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. If you would like to have a copy of this presentation and also the previous presentations, then you can certainly email me at ldmomberg@gmail.com, ldmomberg@gmail.com, and I will forward the current presentation and also past presentations. Now, learners, just to remind you why the legislation was required, and remember we said it was all introduced after 1994, and the legislation was enacted in response to the demand for redress and equity both in small businesses and also in large businesses. So what are we going to cover today? Today we're going to look at broad-based black economic empowerment, and Amanda traveled all the way from Cape Town just to do that slides and presentation with you, and I will follow up with the National Credit Act. Amanda, I see we've got Kailsville High School, Daniel Scale. They've joined us. To the learners who attend those schools, welcome to you. I see New Orleans Secondary School is also with us. And then the number 9143, a visitor, welcome to you also. Right, learners, Amanda, would you take off over and do the black economic empowerment and just deal with that section, please?
Okay, do the slideshow, please. Today we're looking at black economic empowerment and broad-based black economic empowerment. And we're also going to look at the purpose of broad-based black economic empowerment and black economic empowerment. And in actual fact, there is a difference between the two. Initially, we first had black economic empowerment, and that concentrated on black management and black ownership. And then it was realized that is not enough when it comes to empowerment, and that's when we moved over to broad-based black economic empowerment.
Amanda, I wonder, could you just define again the concept black? Who does that include and who does it exclude?
Okay, Leicester, as in the previous shows, we said black means it's white non-whites or people of color. It will be your Indians, it's your colored people and your black people. That is the umbrella of known as black.
Okay, thank you for that. I see that Bongane High School van Douglas, die Noord-Kaap het ingeskakel. Okay, ek wonder of dit die Afrikaanse leerders is wat ingeskakel het vir die Engels was. But we say welcome to Bongane High School also.
Yes, indeed. Just to recap, we were saying the purpose is black owned, black controlled and black managed businesses.
Amanda, yeah, I think we need to go a little bit slower. Could you just go back to that slide again? The previous one?
Okay, let's see.
Right, so you say that the BBEE,
yes,
the purpose of that is that they want more of the blacks to control our economy. They want more of the blacks to manage businesses and more of the blacks to own businesses.
Yeah, that's right, Leicester.
But Amanda, black-owned businesses, when is a business owned by blacks? When can we say it is a black-owned business?
A black-owned business would be when the shareholders of the business control and own 50.1% of the shares.
Okay, so you say when they control the majority of shares?
The majority shareholders, which is 50.1% of the shares.
Amanda, how does that differ from black empowerment, black empowered?
Okay, well, black empowered businesses is when the ownership of the business is 25.1%.
When they have 25.1% of the shares is in the hands of the blacks.
Yes, then it's black empowered
then
business.
Then it's black empowered enterprise.
That's right.
And then do you also get black woman empowered businesses?
That's only fair, but black women empowered businesses will be when it's 30.1%.
Okay, so now it's 30.1 if it's black woman empowered, right?
Business.
Okay, you may continue.
Black economic empowerment looks at the empowerment of black people in the following areas. We looked at ownership, where we said the ownership, we want to encourage as much black shareholders in the business. We want to see blacks in management position, that's on executive level and board level. But particularly with broad-based black economic empowerment, this is a scorecard where we try to accredit a business. And what we do, we're going to measure them according to 7 pillars and give a scorecard. It's basically grade 12s like you people get in a report. Think of your 7 pillars as your 7 subjects. And your score will be given according to what you've performed in each subject. Over here is the 7 pillars. We're just going to glance at it quickly. Okay, let us just go back. We have black management as being the first pillar we're going to look at. There's number 2, preferential procurement, enterprise development, corporate social investment, skills development, employment equity and ownership. Many of these concepts you have met before. Corporate social investment, you should know what it is, as well as skills development and employment equity. The first pillar we're going to look at is going to be your ownership. And at ownership, we're going to measure the number of individual black shareholders, excluding our pension funds. Remember, we said earlier, we want to have black-owned businesses. And we want to get this figure up to 50.1%. Then secondly, we look at the pillar of management. We're going to look at our entire management team and we're going to see how many blacks are there on senior executive level and in senior positions in the companies. Those are managers that are there to make decisions. And then those that are on senior executive level will obviously get a higher weighting than those that are in non-executive positions. The third pillar we're going to look at is in employment equity. With employment equity, we're going to look at our entire labor or our workers that we have, and we're going to look across the level how much black employer representation there is. So we're going to see, we're starting right across the firm, we can see, are all our black people on lower management? Are all the black people just general cleaners and workers, or are they on management level as well?
So we are talking about the 3 levels of management: top level,
middle
level, and the
lower level. What happens in many firms, Leicester, is that on the lower level there's a lot of black managers, but we see very few of them as you go up the hierarchy or the organizational chart at the business.
Amanda, yes, at the lower level you say there's a lot of black representation. Would you say that that is a legacy of the apartheid system that we had?
Yes, it's a legacy of the apartheid system, and I just think a lot of, especially with the transformation, a lot of companies, when they realize they should have blacks on management, it's easier to give them positions where there's no decision making really.
Yeah.
They're not on board level. So we do have black managers, but we have them supervising the canteen, we have them supervising the cleaning or at work. We don't have them in marketing, finances, and those portfolios where it really matter.
And that defeats the whole purpose of the Bbbee Act.
It does, but I think it's a slow process, and now after 1994, we finally, after 19 years, we actually seeing some more progress.
So I think now we can see why it was important that we have that redress and fairness in the business corporate world. Because prior to 1994, blacks were employed mostly in the lower level of management.
Lower level of management, they're normally doing the menial work. They were normally your cleaners, your people working on behind the machine, on the construction industry, in the mining industry and that. And with black economic empowerment, there's a move to bring black people into the boardroom.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Let's continue. We were talking about employment equity. Let's move on to preferential procurement.
Amanda, maybe you just uncap that concept, preferential and then procurement.
Okay, let's start with the word procurement. Procurement means to buy or purchase. So procurement is just a fancy word if you're buying something.
Yes.
And preferential is when you give preference to something. Like if I ask you if you want a cup of coffee or tea and you prefer a Coke, because preference means what's your first option. So businesses are measured according to the ownership status of their suppliers. That means is ours or are our suppliers from the previously disadvantaged group. If our suppliers are mostly black, then when it comes to preferential procurement, we will get a good score.
Good.
Skills development. All businesses should be involved in skills development, grade 12. But weighting will be given according to the amount spent as a percentage of the payroll on the one hand. I don't know if you can remember, the percentage of the payroll that's supposed to go to skills development is 1%. If your company is spending more than 1% on skills development, then you will get a higher score on the scorecard. And we also look at the percentage of black learnerships or black learners on the other hand that the business has been training. The following pillar is going to be corporate social investment. And corporate social investment grade 12, you must know that this is a guarantee that always comes in the question paper. Section B type questions, very, very familiar for this. Businesses are rated according to how much funds they contribute to social investment schemes. Remember, business is supposed to spend 1% of your profit on CSI. So as soon as we spend more than 1% on CSI, then we get a good scorecard for your Bbbee. What are the implications for business of this act?
Amanda, before we go to the implications, could we just summarize again the 7 pillars? I think it's important in past question papers, they've asked the learners just to identify 5 of the pillars, 10 marks. But you can also be asked to explain the pillars for 12 marks, 16 marks. So it's important that the learners know what are the pillars, and they should be able to write some notes on the pillars. Let's just recap quickly. The first one we had was ownership. Remember, we had ownership, black ownership.
I'm just trying to get the previous slide.
Yeah, no, we are just testing the, we're just testing the memory of the learners. There we go. The ownership, that was the first one. Second one was management. And remember, we spoke about senior management and non-senior management. The third one was preferential procurement. We said preferential means giving preference, and procurement means to buy. Then we had enterprise development, CSI, skills development, and employment equity. Now, Amanda, I'm an old man. I can't remember all these fancy words. So I would like to use the first letter of each pillar.
Okay.
Okay, let's play a game. I say the O stands for only. What do you say? What will the M be?
Only men.
Good. Only men. Then I say the P. Only men prefer. What would you say? What will be the E? Only men prefer.
Now you got me.
Eating.
Eating.
Calamari. Sundays. Every time.
Okay.
How do you like that? So, learners, that's an easy way of remembering the 7 pillars. You take the first letter of each pillar, and Amanda just developed a nice mnemonic for you. Only men prefer eating calamari Sundays
every time.
Every time.
Not bad.
Not bad, eh?
Not bad at all.
Amanda, while we were busy with that, there were still more learners. Bongani, I said they've got both English-speaking learners and Afrikaans-speaking learners, and that the English-speaking learners are tuned in now, and the Afrikaans learners will join us later. Then we've also got Retang Tutu High School from Postmasburg. Welcome to those learners also. We've got visitor 0500, and also visitors 9143. Welcome to you guys. I trust that you are enjoying the session that Amanda is leading. Amanda, can we go to the next slide?
Okay, let us just find where we are.
Okay. Let's just see what the next slide entails.
I think we just go to the one I said the section 8 type question.
That one.
Okay. Grade 12s, we were talking about, Leicester was saying earlier, how can we ask this question? Most often your triple BEE comes in the form of a section 8 type question. It's either multiple choice questions, match the missing word, or one of those questions. Here's an example. I'm going to go slowly through the example because I want one of our schools to SMS us with the answer, okay? The Broad-Based Black Economic Act targets several pillars for growth and development and is identified as one of the pillars. So you must identify one of the pillars.
I don't think you're going to catch him with that one.
Is it ownership, capital, quality of performance, or is it insurance? And this question comes from the November the 2011 paper.
And while we're waiting, I see Nareen Khan from Tafelsig has just joined us. She and her friends and also the educator.
And
welcome
answer.
To you also. Did we have an answer?
Yes, she says it's A.
She answered A. Again, Tafelsig is getting all the correct answers today. Tafelsig, well done.
And the answer is indeed A. Well done, Tafelsig.
I'm sure she brought a smile on the face of Mrs. Jacobs and Mrs. Voges there at Tafelsig High School. Amanda, do we have another section A question?
No, that's the only one. But what I did for you, like most often I see this asked in section A. In the MCQ we had it November 2011, November 2012, November 2010. So as I said, broad-based black economic empowerment with your other acts, they will give you a statement, and most often you must identify which act it is. Did you want to make a comment, Leicester?
Yeah, no, I just detect a pattern. It was asked in 2010, 2011, 2012. What's the possibility of it being asked in 2013?
The possibility, as I said, is strong. What they normally do is that they ask you, they make a statement.
Yeah.
And then they say you need to identify the statement with one of the acts.
Okay.
So therefore you need to know all of your acts. In last year's question paper in 2012, they actually had it as a section B type question. And it says, read the scenario below and answer the question that follows. The African Finance Corporation Limited is mandated to promote development in South Africa. Their primary focus is to increase the participation of black people in all sectors of the economy. When you read that line already, you knew this is black economic empowerment. To make a positive impact on job creation, skills development and training, as well as to encourage preferential procurement. To achieve this, AFC Ltd engages in a number of activities across provinces. Ltd, AFC, this is a
public company.
Indeed it is. Question 1. I'm going to put the 3 questions on the slide for you, and we will give you the time just to go back and see if you can answer them. Preferential procurement, that is the buying, is one of the pillars of broad-based black economic empowerment. You are asked to list 3 other pillars. You may not in your answer mention preferential procurement again.
Maybe we can just help them again. We said only men prefer eating calamari Sundays every time.
Let's see, Tafelsig, if you can come up with the answers.
I think Creso is going to give you the correct answer now. I'm sure they also tuned in.
Kambungani, pick up those SMSs. Pick up that phone and SMS us.
Remember the number is 31498. 31498.
While you typing in the first answer, let's look at 4.2.2.
Amanda, I see that Nareen from Tafelsig answered. Let's just check quickly what is the answer she gave, the response.
Okay, Nareen from Tafelsig said ownership, CSI and management. Well done, Tafelsig.
Well done. That's 6 out of 6 for that question.
And the 3 that you don't mention would obviously be skills development, it will be enterprise development, and it will be employment equity.
Good.
The second question is here. Okay, there we go. So Noreen's answers was ownership, CSI and management.
Well done, Noreen.
Your second question said, explain the meaning of preferential procurement as stated in the article. The article didn't say much. All that it used was the term preferential procurement. So it's your understanding of that for 4 marks.
I think maybe we should just give them the answer.
Okay.
So they should include in the answer the following.
Okay. In your answer, your suppliers supporting other BBBE companies, or it could just have been your supplier should be previously disadvantaged. Oh, Leicester, you were right there. Cresway gave the answer. Ownership status of the suppliers. Your suppliers must be previously disadvantaged, meaning they must be black. Or coloured or Indian, because that's all included of being black. And then the last question was, how does AFC Ltd promote BBBE development in South Africa? Motivate your answer. Now this particular question comes from the case study, so we need to go back to the case study for you to be able to answer that. The question said, what does African Finance Corporation do to promote black economic empowerment? So the article said, the African Finance Corporation Limited is mandated to promote development in South Africa. Their primary focus is to increase the participation of black people in all sectors of the economy, to make an impact on job creation, skills development and training, as well as to encourage preferential procurement. To achieve this, AFCL engage in a number of activities across provinces. So grade 12s, so we can see from our answer over here that AFC is busy with skills development, they are busy with training, They also encourage preferential procurement, and their primary focus is also to increase the participation of black people in all sectors of the economy. Any answer there would have given you a mark, guaranteed. There we go. So it was to increase the participation of black people in all sectors of the economy, skills development, job creation, training, and encouraging preferential procurement. Grade 12s, when you're referred to or you're requested to give an answer from the case study, you are allowed to quote directly from the case study. Do not think this is English and you must write the words in your own answer or write the answer in your own words. Thank you, Leicester. Let's go over to you.
Amanda, yes, thank you very much for taking us through the Bbbee Nca. I'm sure the learners learned something from it and that they'll use it, study it, and that they'll be able to find it useful in the examination. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I just want to know who your character is.
You know what that guy is doing? What he is saying is, listen, we are going to look at the National Credit Act now. And we're going to look at it in detail. And so we want to see everything. We need to know everything about the National Credit Act.
Okay.
Right. So let's see, learners. National Credit Act again. Recent legislation. Very, very recent. Just hang on, Amanda.
Okay.
Okay. What do you need to know about the National Credit Act? You need to know firstly, with regard to any act, any concept, very important that you know the description of the term. And in this case, we need to know what is credit. Now, you may have your own understanding, but it's important that you have the correct concepts, that you use it correctly in the sentence. So firstly, description of credit. Then also, you need to know which are the transactions that are covered by the National Credit Act. Not all transactions are covered. You need to know which transactions. Very important, you also need to know which transactions are excluded from the National Credit Act. Then, you need to know the purpose of the National Credit Act. I've been saying it ad nauseum already. You need to know the purpose of all your acts. Very important. You need to know what are the consumer's rights, what are the advantages of the act, the disadvantages, and then finally, what is the implication for the businesses. Righto, before we do that, let us just acknowledge the presence of KS Shuping High is also watching the telematics. Welcome to you, KS Shipping. We trust that you are going to learn a lot from these sessions. So firstly, let's see quickly, what is credit? Credit simply is the ability of a customer to obtain goods or services before paying for them on the understanding that payment will be made in future. Now, it's built on trust. If a business trusts you as a client, as a customer, the business will grant you credit. Now, obviously, credit is not the only means that the business do their business. We also get what is called cash transactions. Now, the advantage of cash transactions is the business gets the money immediately. But credit sales also help to increase the sales or the turnover of a business. So it's an important concept, important part of business development, the granting of credit. And this Credit Act was brought about or enacted because credit was being granted left, right and center to all and sundry without taking into consideration whether the customer or the client is able to repay the money. And so that's why we had credit. The Act covers the following items. It includes all services that are rendered. And you can see the example I used, the Eskom, the electricity that your parents use. If you do not have a prepaid box, then they get it on credit. And at the end of the month, they've got to pay their electricity account. If you're going to buy a LED television from Game for 17,000, you don't have the money but would like to watch your sports on a big screen, then Game will grant you credit and you can then buy that article on credit. So it refers to services. It also includes goods and also to all loans that are granted by banks, whether it is to purchase a car or to purchase a home. Let's look at the transactions that the Credit Act covers. Firstly, we said it covers an overdraft. An overdraft simply means that you are allowed to withdraw more money from the bank than the money you've got in your bank account. So say for example, but this arrangement must be made with the bank. You can't just decide to give yourself an overdraft. You need to make arrangements with the bank. So say for example, you've got 2,000 Rand in the bank and you'd like to buy a, let's say a radio for 3,000. Then the bank will allow you to write out a check for 3,000, provided you've got that overdraft agreement with the bank. If you don't have that agreement with the bank and you write out that check for 3,000 and there's only 2,000 Rand in your bank, Amanda, what's going to happen to that check?
Oh, your check is going to bounce, Leicester. But I really don't think the learners will buy a radio with their 3,000 Rand. More like a new cell phone or something.
The new cell phones is not even 3,000. You see some of them going for 7,000, 8,000. So you need quite a lot of smackaroos.
Oh yes, especially those new Samsungs. I see they have a zoom option now.
You're talking about the Samsung, is it the S4?
The new S4, yes, I see they have the zoom camera at the back. Just been released.
It's amazing, and some people don't have the money, but they'll buy it on credit.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, so it covers an overdraft. The National Credit Act also covers all credit card transactions, all credit card agreements that you have with your bank. And you can see a pattern is going to develop as I mentioned these transactions that are covered. Mortgage bond, that means if you want to buy a house and when you pay the house off over 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, then a mortgage bond gets, mortgage bond agreement is between you and the bank, and that allows you to borrow money to buy the house. Then it also includes all installment agreements. The example I used earlier about that LED TV, if it costs 17,000, then they will add interest divided by the number of months that you've got to pay that TV off, and that will be your installment agreement. So the Act covers that also. And then the Act also covers all secured loans. Secured loans would be loans that requires you to have some kind of security. So if you look at all of those transactions that are covered, one word jumps out immediately. With all those transactions, the credit providers have got the right to charge interest. And so you can see basically the Credit Act was introduced to deal with transactions that charges interest to the consumer or to the client. Right now, so those are included. What are the transactions that are excluded? The first one you'll see insurance policies, that's not included. It's not covered by the National Credit Act. Secondly, the lease of immovable property is not covered by the National Credit Act. Stokvel transactions. Now, yes, that is the correct spelling. Stokvel transactions are not covered by the National Credit Act. Amanda, would you like to elaborate quickly on Stokvel transactions? Because that's quite unique to South Africa. It's not used in any other country.
To explain Stokvel, like in layman's terms, is like when a group of people come together and they have like a savings scheme. Then each month, if we are 12 people, then 12 of us will put money into the Stokvel. And then all the money collected in month one will go to one person in January month. Come February month, we all put our money into the club again and it goes to a second person. So everybody in the group had a chance to get a turn to get their money. It's more of a saving scheme. More of a saving. But it's built on trust again. Oh, absolutely. Because the guy or the lady who gets the money in January Must continue contributing the rest of the 11 months as well.
Yeah, so there are advantages and disadvantages to the stokvel also, eh?
Yes, and I think very much cultural as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And very unique to South Africa. Very unique. Thank you for that. No, so, but stokvels transactions are not covered by the National Credit Act. And then finally, ordinary shares, they're also not covered by the National Credit Act. Right, learners, what is the purpose of the National Credit Act? Now, if ever you had an opportunity to write anything down, maybe you just need to write very briefly the main concepts regarding the purpose of the National Credit Act. Why was it introduced? And it was introduced to promote the development of a credit market. And I think I might just add there an equitable credit market. What happened in the past was people would apply for credit and they would just be refused credit. And so this act regulates the development of and promotes the development of a equitable credit market. It also ensures consistent treatment of different credit products. Now remember the credit products I alluded to earlier, your bank overdraft, your credit cards. It ensures that those different credit products are treated consistently in the same manner. It also encourages responsible borrowing, and to me this is the pardon, to me this is the most important one. It encourages responsible borrowing. In the past, people would buy goods on credit. They'll buy it from different retailers. The one retailer doesn't know that you've got an account at another retailer, and at the end of the month you find the person who borrowed is unable to pay for these products that they bought. And so the National Credit Act encourages responsible borrowing. You can only borrow if you have the means to pay back. And so that's very important. Then the National Credit Act promotes equity in the product market. I think I alluded to that earlier. Then the National Credit Act addresses and corrects imbalances in the negotiating power. The negotiating power is between the credit provider and the client, and you know when you would like to have credit, like to have money available, and you are desperate, then credit providers, they've got a lot of power. And when they do have a lot of power, it means they can charge exorbitant interest rates. And so the National Credit Act actually protects those customers or clients who borrow money from the credit providers. And then the Credit Act, one of the main purposes, discourages reckless credit granting. It regulates how credit can be granted, to whom credit can be granted, how much credit can be granted, so that businesses at the end of the day will know that if money has been, if they lend money to a particular person, that person will be able to repay that money back to the business. So you can see the purpose of the National Credit Act: to bring in fairness, to bring in equity, and again we are alluding to all the items we spoke about earlier, to transform the credit granting environment, to make sure that everybody is treated equally when they do apply for credit, obviously based on their credit rating. Righto, so what rights are afforded to the consumers or the clients who would like to borrow money? Firstly, the consumer who borrows money, or the client, is entitled to get a copy of the credit agreement. Now in the past, they used to give copies of credit agreements only when you requested one, and when you looked at the content of that credit agreement, there will be such a lot of fine small print that you just glance over, you don't read it, but when there's a dispute, then the credit providers use that against you. So you can get a copy of the credit agreement. The credit agreement must be in simple language. You should be able to understand it. That's one of the rights afforded to the consumers. Then consumers may not be discriminated unfairly. You should treat all applicants the same based on their credit rating and not on their race, their color, or their class. Then when the credit provider does not approve the granting of the credit to you, they can't just say credit refused. They've got to give you reasons why they refused the credit. Then all information regarding the credit agreement must be available in an official language. In the Western Cape, our languages would certainly be English, Afrikaans, and then isiXhosa. I alluded to it earlier that the information in the credit agreement must be plain, simple, understandable language. They mustn't use business jargon that the client or the customer do not understand. And then the customer has got access and challenge credit records and information. Very often what happens is that if you do not pay your account regularly, you can get blacklisted. And so when that happens, the customer has got a right to find out which company was involved, why was I blacklisted if I'm paying regularly, and for how long I've been blacklisted. So there's total transparency with regard to the whole credit agreement provided in the National Credit Act to the consumers. Righto, so are there any advantages to the Credit Act? Certainly, there are some advantages. Firstly, it protects the consumer against unfair credit practices. I alluded to it earlier. Unfair credit practice would be where they charge exorbitant interest rates, where they want you to pay the amount that you borrowed over a longer period of time so that they can charge more interest and get more profit. So it protects the consumer against unfair credit practices. The consumer also gets protection against excessive credit granting. So there's a ceiling to the amount that you can borrow based on your ability to repay. Now, if a credit provider provides you with credit and he knows that you cannot pay, then that credit agreement is actually null and void. And so you will not be held responsible for the debts that you incurred. Very important clause in the National Credit Act. Then the credit agreement, all information must be revealed to the customers from the minute they walk into the room until they sign the agreement. All information must be provided to the customers. And it discourages the consumer from purchasing goods they can't afford. I spoke to you about earlier, there's a means test, there's a limit based on your affordability and your income, and so the possibility of things being repossessed has been reduced quite a lot because of the National Credit Act. So you can see the National Credit Act has got quite a few advantages for the consumer. What advantages are there for the credit providers? It protects the credit provider against bad debt. You know that when you borrow money and you are not able to pay that money, then some businesses will have to write off that money, and we call that a bad debt. But because of the checks and balances built into the National Credit Act, the chances of a person who got credit not paying is reduced substantially. Then the National Credit Act allows a credit provider to charge interest and other costs. The interest, you know, will be on the amount borrowed. The other cost, what they talk about, is an initiation fee. So when you initiate the idea of getting credit from a credit provider, they can charge you an initiation fee. The credit providers will be controlled by the credit regulator. All credit providers must be registered by the credit regulator. However, there are certain conditions. If you've got 100 or more credit agreements, then you must be registered by the credit regulator. That's the first condition. The other one is that if all your credit agreements totals more than 500,000, so whether it's 100 or not, If it totals more than $500,000, then you must also register with a credit regulator. If you are a credit provider and you've got more than 100 credit agreements and you do not register, then all credit agreements that between you and the customer becomes null and void. The credit agreement must be in writing. It protects the creditor, so all clauses will be included in there. And then credit allows the business to be sustainable. I spoke to you earlier about it. The granting of credit increases the sales and the turnover of the business, and it also creates a very sustainable position for the owners. Are there any disadvantages? Certainly there are. For the consumer, those days of just walking into a shop and saying, I would like to have that, can I sign, I'll pay later, it's gone. There's no easy access to credit. So the consumers must budget more carefully because the credit limit is based on affordability, how much you can afford to pay back. If you are under debt review, then you cannot apply for credit. And then obviously refusal of credit by the retailers will certainly lower the standard of living of the consumers. Disadvantages for the credit provider: there is the administrative burden, extra paperwork, very time consuming, and it's very costly. The business may lose customers because some customers may not be credit worthy, and so their chances of getting credit is naught. And then debt collection procedure is more difficult. I spoke to you earlier about debt review. If you are unable to pay your creditors, then you can go for debt review. And for credit providers to get money when you are in debt review, they'll get less money, and obviously that will influence their profitability. And may not collect debts from consumers who are under debt review. I spoke to you earlier about it. Consumers who are under debt review, credit providers cannot collect money from them. They must collect money from an institution that deals with the debt review. And then credit cannot be granted recklessly, left, right and center, and this obviously impacts on the sales and the profitability of the business. However, because it's not granted recklessly, the chances of money not being recovered becomes less and less. However, it's also a disadvantage because they cannot recover money from people who cannot pay, people who are under debt review. Learners, we look at the implications for the business. All credit providers must provide the client with a quotation, and I alluded to that earlier. It's an administrative process, and then they must assess the consumer's credit worthiness. That's time consuming, and there are strict credit controls that leads to the reduction in credit granted. And it's more difficult to sell products because those people cannot afford to pay cash, and you are going to lose customers. It's more difficult to buy products for consumers that do not have the means to buy the goods on cash and that relies on buying on credit. And finally, businesses struggle to survive because many of them depend on credit sales. Learners, that in a nutshell is the National Credit Act. On the screen you'll briefly see a case study of a question that appeared in the 2010 question paper. It says there that Bbbee Nca completed the studies at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and wanted to buy a new Juries for 180,000. She applied for credit, and after 2 days she received an SMS from the salesperson with the following message: credit application unsuccessful. She was very disappointed. And now what do they require from you? Explain Shivani's rights regarding her rejected credit application and the manner in which she was informed. Right, we don't have time for you to respond, but let's just see quickly. She's protected by the National Credit Act. That's the first thing you need to know. Secondly, she must obtain reasons why a credit application was successful in terms of the National Credit Act. And then thirdly, she's got a right to dispute the fact that their credit has been declined. So firstly, she was protected by the NC Act. They must provide her with reasons why credit was not granted, and she's got a right to dispute. If we look at the manner in which this information was relayed to her via SMS, is that the correct manner? Certainly not. The manner in which they must respond to you depends on the medium of communication in the application form. For example, if it was in writing, then they must respond in writing. They can also communicate via electronic mail, but they cannot send you an SMS. An SMS is too impersonal. They need to be professional, tell you in writing, communicate, and then you've got the right to dispute. Learners, time has run out, and it was such a short session, Amanda, going through the Bbbee,
yes,
and also the National Credit Act. Have you got a concluding comment?
Yes, all I wanted to say to the grade 12s, it's time now to buckle down. Last week before the prelims, and after that, we're 50 days before the final exam, so I'm wishing you luck with your prelim exams. Work hard, focus, and now's the time to sacrifice. If everybody else is having a good time that's not studying, you need to work irrespective of that. Thank you, Leicester.
Amanda, thank you for that very valuable advice. I'm sure the learners from the Western Cape, Northern Cape, Overberg, and all other areas will certainly heed those advice and take it to heart. Learners, I want to really thank you for joining us today. I trust that you've learned something from this session. Remember, we're having our next session again next week. We want you to tune in. We've completed now our recent legislation, and next week we're going to look at investment opportunities and also investment insurance. Please enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll see you next week again. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.